reading from The Language Crystal by Lyons. He's talking about right and left, Ra and L, and their effect on the human psyche as symbols of language. So I'll read from this. The symptoms of R and L confusion and backward spelling are not related to any disease of the bioelectric or chemical workings of the brain. These are symptoms of natural patterns in sight and speech, as demonstrated in later chapters. He's talking about dyslexia here, saying it's not a disease. It's totally natural, and the human being uses and needs this to function throughout reality. R and L confusions and reading backwards do more than link two functions in the brain. The right brain is credited with processing music and art, and the left brain with spoken and written words. But scientists who tried to figure out the brain with no reference to the mind had lost their sense of spirit and thus forgotten why they had asked any questions in the first place. Interesting. In Hebrew, Israel means struggle with God. And this is our struggle with the word itself. So, our angular question becomes, is Ra, the light outside, and El, the light within? To answer this, we're building a democracy of soul wherein the logic and institution have an equal vote. So knowledge, belief, and spirit can work together to determine our course of action. What he's saying is that the word Ra means morning sun. It's an ancient Egyptian sun god. The word El is the Hebrew version of this. So this is the Egyptians and the Hebrews. And I'd like to say that not Jews. This is Hebrews. This is way before the word Jew came into being. So, to the Egyptians, Ra is the light that powers us. It's the sun. And to the Hebrews, El is the same thing. However, one refers to the external version and one refers to the internal version. So, the sun outside and the sun within. And what he is saying is that language needs to be balanced and unified. It needs to be, you need to become very aware of the way in which the words that we use either balance us, center us, or throw us off center and fragments us. And in today's modern language, I'd like to say that things are changing rapidly. What he's getting at is that we didn't have written history until we started to wield fire, or quote-unquote technology. Our language actually changed so dramatically once we started to have fire. It changed our life so much that it changed our words so much. And those words eventually became written down because of the use of technology. So life got easier for us, so to speak, to where we could come home at the end of the day and have a heat source and cook food and have more leisure time. And so our language reflected that. Now I'd like to say that I think the same thing is happening right now, where we're going into a post-historical movement, meaning history only exists with writing. So mankind's been on the planet for who knows how long, thousands of years, and never wrote down his story. That's what it's called, his story, history. He's always had my story, which is my internal story, which is the mystery, my story. But writing it down creates history, his story. So what's happening now is with digital information and digital language and the fact that human beings can communicate instantaneously via the internet worldwide to study things, check things, talk to people about their expertise, like pretty much instantly, our language is actually changing again, once again, due to our technology. So our history is going to change. And Lyons is saying that our history is actually going to stop. And I'm not sure I agree with that or not, but it's a very interesting concept that since our language is going to change so dramatically via the digital symbols, the digital words, the digital alphabet, the computer programming languages, it's going to change so fast and so dramatically that we're not going to write it down anymore. And so we're not going to have history. We're going to go into a place of post-history. I know that's really hard to wrap your mind around, but it's an interesting idea, and I think he's onto something. There's no way of knowing what it's going to look like, how it's going to affect our reality, but it does make sense that the virtual world is storing all of our information. And if you can't access the virtual world, then you cannot access that stored information, meaning your language is going to be dictated whether you're in the virtual world or not, meaning your history, I should say your mystery, my story, is going to be dictated by whether or not you have access to the digital world or not. And I'm not sure if this is good or bad, but it's interesting that he says we're going into a time of post-history, meaning we're not going to write things down anymore, at least not in the same way. We're going to store them in new words, in new formats. And the only thing I can think of is the virtual format, which really doesn't exist at all unless you have a plug in your wall and you can access the internet and access electricity. But what if you don't? What if you're a person who lives, somewhere else where you're deeply entrenched in nature and you don't even have electricity, you don't use it? Then your history or your mystery is going to be totally different. It's going to be upheld by your own internal dialogue, which is the whole main point. Our whole internal dialogue is what's dictating the way in which reality appears to us. And that's what this video is about, is to try to get people to become more aware of the way they use words and the way in which words originally are meant to be used. So just going further into the idea of mirroring as a part of the way in which our language developed, it's totally natural. The anagram, which is just moving letters around within a word, and also just I got to reiterate the R and the L as being the biggest shifters in our language, the biggest movers. So R rotates or radiates, and L elevates and electrocutes. So R and L are present and hold the biggest shifters. Here's just a couple of words to show that. The difference between friend and fiend is just the letter R. One letter. Totally different meanings. Friend is a positive thing, a fiend is a negative thing. You can see how the R and the L are both light or enlightenment, but one's negative and one's positive. They're just polar versions of the same thing, light. The difference between a beast and a breast. One is terrible and taking, and the other is life-giving and a symbol of fertility and life. Speaking of life, to live, spelled backwards, is evil. Have you ever noticed that? Huh, interesting. So if you're not living correctly, you could consider yourself to be evil. Not in a bad, that's a bad way, but it's just backwards. It's just mirrored. Lived, spelled backwards, is devil. Do you think there's a coincidence there? No, of course not. This is the way in which our language evolved out of our psyche, and it's time that we become aware of it. Moving a few letters around, you've got scared becoming sacred. Same letters, just the A and the C have been moved. That's it. We're all talking about grammar. So that's just the G in front of Ram, which is Ra, the sun god, Ram. And then Ram mirrored is Mar, which is Mary, maritime, marine, which is the female water. So you got male, female, God, goddess, totally balanced, mirrored. Ram and Mar are just mirrors of each other. This is not coincidence. Our language does this. It's because our alphabet, the Greek alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, the Coptic alphabet, and the English alphabet are all based on principles in nature, principles of light that we actually see in nature. And each one of these letters actually has a huge amount of meaning behind it, which is I don't have time to go into that now, but it's pretty impressive. We have words like ka, ba, and la, known as the Hebrew mystical tradition, Kabbalah. But ka in Egypt means soul. Ba in Egypt is also a type, a certain aspect of your soul that refers to the sun light. And this is where we get, and la is just El, which is also the sun in a different aspect. And you get this root ba and ka and la in all kinds of words, and they hold that meaning throughout. So Ba is the ancient sun god known as Baal. Baal. And this is where we get Abel from Cain and Abel. So A at the beginning of a word is always alpha privative, which means the A negates the meaning of the word. So this is Baal or Bel, which is the sun god, and A is saying this negates that. So Abel is saying not Baal. Just like, let's see, what's another one? Apostle is saying not apostolate, not a post. We've got Babel, which is Ba, and then Ba again, Baal, Ba, which is where we get Abba, which is just mirrored or reversed. Abba means Holy Father. Babel, or Ba-Abel, is also where we get Ba-Ba-Lon for Babylon, right? So you can see how all these roots come up and they change the meaning of words, but it's very important to understand what the root actually means when you look at a word. Moving on, the difference between fright and flight is simply the L again, the R and the L. They hold such big shifters in our psychic language. Replacing R and L, you've got being scared and then being able to flee or flight. Also, flight refers to, flying. What's the difference between fair and fail? Just an R and an L. Fair and fail. Just one letter. Male and mare. Well, this is, obviously male is man, and a mare is a female version of that in the animal kingdom. Horses. The only difference between male and mare is just R and L. So, this is just scratching the surface of the way in which these symbolic letters affect our psyche and affect our reality. So if you have an interest in the study of etymology, I highly recommend purchasing the book called The Language Crystal. It will blow your mind, by Lawrence William Lyons. And his name, ironically, or not ironically, Lawrence means light. William is, of course, the will. And Lion refers again to light. It's also the lion, like the actual lion, because lion has always been a symbol of the sun. Leo, in astrological terms, is when the sun is just past the solstice, so it's at its height in the middle of summer. So his name is encoded with quite a bit of meaning as well. And then I'm just going to read one more excerpt about the power of the language. Words. Words need your intention to beget for them new life. As flowers bend and stretch toward light, so living words seek enlightenment until they plant their seeds again in the distant soil. So just in closing, I just want to say that this is just scratching the surface. I mean, this book is incredibly dense. I'm not even through it yet, but learning how the dyslexia, the anagram, the mirroring, and the certain tones have created our language is incredibly empowering. So in closing, I'd just like to say that time, spelled backwards, means to emit. So we're not actually trapped in time. What we're doing energetically is emitting our own unique signature. And an emission is a expansion. when we practice this, we can become closer to paradise. Para means close to. Dice, or Dios, is deity or God, so closer to God. We can come from a mentality of death and decay of the tomb, and we can be reborn in the womb. And we can stop living in fear, and we can start to feel. In order for all this to happen, in order for us to heal, we need to learn how to listen and hear. So, hopefully you like this video. Hopefully it inspires you to do some of your own research into etymology. And please share. Appreciate your listening.